Hello, my name is Dr. Susan Swem from the United States, and I have with us two wonderful guests. I want to tell you a little bit about what we'll be talking today. We're going to do a brief podcast with a few of the wonderful people that we've come into contact over the last several years. And the topic is restorative justice within lived experiences of treatment. What we have found at Now I See a Person Institute is that the majority of our clients who have had certain challenges that would be able to be discussed in a DSM, um, they find complete freedom from these symptoms that they initially had, that they no longer identify as whatever type of diagnosis that they were given, and that the road to this freedom and transformation is very simple. We have been calling what we do as practitioners humanizing ourselves for the other. And within these stories of clinicians humanizing themselves, we learn about what people need for these symptoms that many feel are often not able to have the experience of recovery. That recovery is inherent in every person. I just want to pass the baton now over to Margaret, and maybe you could just introduce yourself and why you're here today.
Hi, I started this journey several years ago. I won't say how many, working with Susan as a student. I had a couple classes with you, but then I started working at Now I See a Person when it was at a horse ranch and we were doing equine assisted therapy. And it was an incredible experience because I saw how quickly, um, how quickly we were able to help people turn things around in their lives. We were working in particular with foster families and foster children and also their biological families. And I had never seen anything like it. I'd had a few placements before, where I worked as a trainee, but there was nothing quite like this. And I think it was because, back then I thought it was because of the horses, but I've come to realize that while they did play a role, it was that we were just treating people like people and not a diagnosis. We weren't using all of that language of pathology to make them into just their problems. Instead, we saw the humans who were dealing with problems, yes, but those problems were temporary. It wasn't a permanent condition of their mind. It was a temporary situation that they could get through, and they just needed to be encouraged and have their strengths be so. Ever since then, I I have never found anything else like it. Like you said, Susan, I moved away and I looked for other practitioners who would do what you did and couldn't find any, and so I ended up just calling you back. And here we are now, working together again, and it's
No.
it's amazing. I love it.
And just for those who don't know anything about Now I See a Person Institute, is that we're a nonprofit institute devoted to research, teaching, training, and clinical work from collaborative dialogical practices. And I was fortunate enough to be with the Houston Galveston Institute at its inception of thinking about what collaborative dialogical practices might mean and how we might position ourselves as therapists. And always in the foremost of our mind was that symptoms and diagnostic descriptions were just symptoms and diagnostic descriptions. They in no way should lead the therapist in how to be with clients. They shouldn't lead the therapist in what kind of conversations they have with clients. What we saw initially was that our field had accidentally created a black hole. And that's a quote from Harry Galician. He said, in the broad field referred to as mental health, we have contributed a language of description, thousands of words over the last century. Most might be called deficiency language, and that they create a world of description that only understands through what is wrong, broken, absent, or insufficient. What I'm challenging is a language of description through which we have created this world of what we call mental health and mental illness. And so he would go on to talk about how, in creating this world, we as people created this world as mental illness, that we see mental illness when it's not there. And we have a list of symptoms within a book that says if you see these cluster of symptoms, then that means that this person has these types of issues. And we overlook entirely who that person is and how they're suffering. And as John Schotter used to talk about, we apply these counterfeit methods, like counterfeit money, to try to, in good faith, help people achieve wellness. But instead of them achieving wellness, they they achieve unwellness. Maybe something happened and, life is very tough. It can be very harsh. And recently I was talking to a clinician that at 15, she was put on medication in the United States, which happens to many, many, many um, young people. Someone initially comes in and says, maybe I'm feeling suicidal. I don't feel right about myself. My life is so miserable. And so the curiosity to find out what is occurring that someone is miserable decreases. And what increases is that this person is high acuity. And do we stop that? What do we do to stop this high acuity? So we also are taught, at least in the United States, that these high acuity cases are due to some type of biological issue. Whereas if we're thinking about, the work that we did with Harry Galician at the Houston Galluson Institute in the early 80s, we did not see people with symptoms of having any type of biological nature, that people had things happen to them, that they were responding to those things that happened to them with a lot of alarm and desperation at times. But through the therapeutic conversation, that we would find opportunities for those things to dissipate, or as we used to call dissolve. And in talking about what is hard for us and talking about how we want those hardships to go away, our clients actually give us a map of how that can happen. But when we start inserting these biological paradigms, that map is put over to the side, never to be seen again. And we have specific techniques and specific ways of helping people that is not something that they want, and it's not something that yields freedom, but yields a lot of times confinement and coercion and fear that they will never get well again. We've had some people talk about this as that the first time that they've had a diagnosis is like they have a cancer that they cannot get well from. And so if you're telling 15-year-olds this, it really does affect their lives in so many multiple ways. They start becoming hopeless that anything can be done to help them. And often the family is blamed for this when when It could be so many natural causes that have, that come to have unnatural explanations. And so throughout the work that we have participated in since the 80s, we talk with people in ways that does not promote deficiency language. We never go into a conversation and say, um, well, that I think that you're bipolar, or I think that you have eating disorder, or I think this, or I think that. Collectively, through the family and through the person who appears to be having the hardest time, we co-evolve definitions, but the definitions aren't as important as how do we get out of those situations that they're in? How do people find happiness again? How do they find self-identities that I'm just having a label? A long time ago, that 15-year-old girl was girl named Betty, and we wrote an article. And in that article, she talked about that she was no longer Betty. She was Betty the anorexic, and she felt like she was Hester Prynne from the Scarlet Letter. And even at that point in time, guys, she talked about that what created change for her was the therapist. It was a therapeutic conversation, that they didn't prey upon her weaknesses. But I remember she talked about that the therapist she had at that point in time, her name was Sally Helms, made her feel like she was the next Robin Gibbons, that she was going to be a famous sportscaster. Because when she went in and had conversations with Sally, she felt better. And little by little, life got to be the way that she wanted it to be. So instead of going into multiple hospitalization, being coherent that there was something wrong with her, or being coherent that there was something wrong with her parents. I remember one time she said to me, and she talked about that her parents, because what was well known for working with people that had quote unquote eating disorders. We don't even call them eating disorders. We tend to call them eating challenges, or other types of words that have maybe some more normalcy and more kind of truth. But I remember she left one session and her mom wasn't able to go to that session, and was very much an athlete. She wasn't able to go to, she was benched from her team because of all the appointments that she was going to. And that really is when she decided that she wasn't sure if she wanted to live anymore. And for a period of time that they took her to somebody else because the physician that she was seeing wanted her to see someone more quote unquote experienced than Sally. And she had this story where her mom wasn't able to come. Her mom was the breadwinner, and her dad was a stay-at-home dad. He was a pastor as well. And the therapist did this blame game. Well, it must be the dad because he's a he's a stay-at-home dad, or it must be the dad because he's a pastor, or it must be the two children that are younger. That there were two little children that had been adopted that were like, like in grammar school. Had to be somebody's fault that this was happening. And I remember her crying when she was recalling that they blamed her parents. So not only was she leaving therapy thinking that she had an incurable disease, but she would leave therapy feeling bad about how they had talked to her parents. Is because we have so many people with lived experiences that want to be able to tell their story, that they want to talk about, is that repair is something that does not have to be difficult. It can be something that can be very simple, that we can surpass our symptoms once we no longer identify as a mental illness symptom. Conferences and in publications, we've called that shedding the limits of severe mental illness narratives. But what we find is that when people start to have hope that they aren't this mental illness diagnosis, and they start to find freedom, and they start to find self agency, that life gets to start to get better. Everybody has a different way of finding that recovery, that wellness, that freedom that they want. It's not something that can be replicated. Right now, we're going to be collecting a few stories to present at this conference so that people have an opportunity to hear their view on this. Because who should be teaching us as clinicians? It's not myself, it's not Margaret, but people who have experienced these types of um, traumas. Most of the time when we talk to people about previous treatments, it's so filled with stories of trauma. Be in these situations of therapeutic trauma, come out the other end so strong and with so much of amplification of what they think should and should not be done in treatment. I'm now going to ask our wonderful guest if there's something that she would like to reflect upon.
Hi, thank you for having me, Dr. Sim and Margaret. Um, I would like to say, firstly, after meeting Dr. Sim and her team, that their approach on how to help people was honestly life-changing, and everything that I was told and taught or said that there wouldn't be said that there wouldn't be a cure or any way out was all it wasn't true. And when I met with Dr. Swim, I saw that I really once I was able to see for myself that things can get better, and through a lot of negative things that happen through um clinical therapy, not with Dr. Swim and our team, but with other therapists that I was going to and treatments that would happen. It was all very negative and it affected myself and my family. But when I would meet with Dr. Swim, their approach was so helpful and they saw me as a person. They didn't use me as a title as the diagnoses I was given or saying that there wasn't a cure for my life and that nothing would get better. Dr. Swim and her team approached it in a different way. They approached it holistically and trying to just be there and be listening and just talk to me as a person. We're all human.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do think when you're a young teenager, specifically, or a young adolescent, and people think that um, clinical therapy, when you go to an office or a institute where they think it's gonna quote unquote help you, it's really not going to. And when you're that young, you're so naive and vulnerable to things that everything that someone says, you will most likely believe it and it will get in your head. And, you know, I got sucked into that and into the system, unfortunately, but I came on the other side after I met Dr. Swim. Know that there's alternatives to help themselves and that not and going to therapy is not always a great thing because sometimes it could be just lies that you're getting fed when you just need someone to listen to you instead of diagnose you and title you and tell you that that's it, there's no more hope left for you. You're going to be like this for the rest of your life.
And I'm going to ask some questions because, when you say that, you know, I wish so much that you were the only person that I've heard say that, but it's been a common theme that somehow that all people are brought in, that you have symptoms, and you're brought in, seen by um, a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and they talk to you for a few minutes, and there's a decision that's made that defines who you are as a person and what's wrong with you, and it's based on a clump of symptoms. Like it's medicine. We might go in and you hear that someone has a broken leg, and so that they can see that broken leg. But we're talking about broken hearts, right? Or um, very difficult situations. How is it to go in and try to explain with your heartfelt desires of what's going on for you, and then to be told that what you have is an illness. What did that sound like when you first heard it?
Um, Terrible. And I was so young that I thought it was like the end of the world for me. I didn't really think, when people say there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that phrase, I didn't really think that there was light at the end of the tunnel because that was just kind of it. Okay, this is your life. This is how it's going to be for the rest of your life. It felt like there was no hope for me, I would say. It was really bad.
And so, I know sometimes older people, like maybe, in their 20s or 30s, they don't believe it, right? Because they have more lived life experiences. Was it
Mhm.
something but it was something that you thought was true, right?
When I was younger,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I thought it was true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I I was also it was a very vulnerable time for me,
Mm-hmm.
and my family, and I didn't really listen to anything but the lies that I was getting told from all the psychiatrists, all the therapists, all the school therapists, or so-called people that think that they're there to help you, but they're actually doing the opposite in reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was a very unsettling feeling. It did not feel very good at all. It just feels when you're so young. Also, as I got older, it kind of felt like that was it. That's it. No more hope for you. This is going to be the rest of your life. Nothing's going to ever get better for you. And I really believe that.
And so, in
Oh,
belief in believing that, how did it change your life?
In believing that, how did it change my life
Mm-hmm.
in negative aspects?
Uh-huh.
Um, Sorry, Dr. Sim. Would you
It's
like
okay.
me to talk about the negative aspects, like how it changed my life?
Yeah, how did someone telling you that you had a disease,
Hmm.
how did that then change your life, the world around you?
Would you like me to share like my experience in regards to that?
Yeah. Whatever feels good to you to share.
Okay.
Hmm.
Um, I would say it changed my life in very negative and unfortunate ways
Hmm.
because when I was younger, and I'm not gonna say what age,
Mm-mm.
when I was younger, I believed that there was no hope and it wouldn't get better, and that my family was against me, but actually in reality, my family was actually trying to help me and
Hmm.
do everything for the better for me. But at that time, I didn't see it because all I saw was my diagnosis as my title, and I would be like, "Hello, my name is blank,
Hmm.
and I have this,
Hmm.
and this." That's how
Hmm.
I felt.
Hmm.
And even though my parents and my family were helping me and wanted to help me, I didn't believe that. And I thought
Hmm.
they were against me. And that all the people, like the therapists, psychologists, counselors, I thought those were the people that were trying to help me. And I fell into everything that I was being fed,
Hmm.
as in when they would say negative things about my family, I also believed that. I
Hmm.
believed that what they would say about my family, my parents, my
Hmm.
dad, my mom, my brother, that they
Hmm.
were against me when in reality those those organizations were the ones that were against me,
Hmm.
trying to help me fall down their system, and I did.
Hmm.
Unfortunately,
Hmm.
that's what happened.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until so many falling down, going down, and going basically through hell after I
Mhm.
got into the system
Mhm.
of, unfortunately to say, I fell into the system of foster care
Mhm.
that when I was getting to go to that residential treatment place,
Mhm.
that, okay, I'm probably gonna go back to foster care right out of that, I thought.
Mhm.
I started to wake up and realize, oh my God, everything that I had been through for those last number of years
Mhm.
was a lie and it was hell. And
Mhm.
my parents actually love me so much and they want me to get better.
Mhm.
They want me to find hope to live again. And all they were trying to help me realize was that I was a person and that I was just going through a hard time.
Mhm.
But that hard time became a hell of a time.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Almost like those professionals were thought that you were defined by that terrible time.
exactly.
Sounds like. Yeah. Even turning you against your family.
Exactly. Unfortunately.
Hmm.
So Margaret, could you say something a little bit more about that? Because, because we're not going to go into specifics here, but like
Hmm.
what when you think of somebody like being defined by a terrible time, then they believe these
Hmm.
diagnoses. They believe
Hmm.
that they have these kind of things or those kind of things or and because they believe that, then it becomes kind of true. Is that right?
Yeah, it becomes like a false reality, but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it's still a form of reality, right? And as we were talking, actually, an analogy came to my mind, and actually, our wonderful guest alluded to it when she mentioned light at the end of the tunnel, because I was thinking like, so so you have traditional therapy, and what it does is it finds you in a dark place and it says, yep, you're in a dark place and we're going to keep you in this dark place because this is what defines you, right?
Yeah.
But what we're trying to do, and now I see a person, is we see that you're in a dark place, but we want to bring the light of truth to your life so that it can improve. So instead of keeping you in that dark place, we point and we say, hey, look, here's this light at the end of the tunnel. Let's walk together to get there.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end of that tunnel and you're in this bright place now. And lo and behold, you don't need us to hold your hand anymore. You don't need any of that, because now you figured out the truth about yourself and your life, that you're not defined by those dark circumstances that you were in before, but you've found the tools to cope when when bad times might come. But you're not defined by them. Um you are not a diagnosis anymore. You are just you going through something, and you're going to be okay at the end of it. Does
Yes.
that make sense? Like,
Yes.
yeah, I was thinking about that as you were talking, and we were definitely on the same wavelength there, because you mentioned truth and light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but I'm just gonna like tweak what you said a teeny bit. So
Sure.
I never see anybody as a problem. See, I really don't. Like,
No.
I wasn't brought up that way. I mean, like, as a young clinician, we weren't taught that someone had a problem. We were taught it was a
Mhm.
problem system, right? If
Mhm.
anything, what I was brought up as a young clinician that the problem was not inside somebody. So I've never seen a problem
Right.
in somebody. I've never talked to a person that I couldn't understand. I've
Oh yeah,
never,
I didn't mean to give the impression that, yeah, I didn't mean to
no,
give that impression.
no, I don't think you tried to either, but I was just trying to tweak it so that to make these types of thoughts easier for other people to hear, because people
Sure.
they really don't understand this because they haven't had these lived experiences that all three of us have being together. And so when I talk to somebody that's suffering, I see the suffering. I do not see a diagnosis. I do not, I mean, I know that there's diagnoses out there, but I never see them as part of a diagnostic criteria. And I've never had a conversation that didn't make sense to me. And, we were talking about this just briefly, but when we have to fight to make our voice heard, then that is a very desperate position to be in. And it's very easy for people to see us as being abnormal because the context demands abnormality. The reason why people healed so quickly at the horse ranch is because it was normal. We were all normal together. Like, was the horses taking carrots differently from one person than the other? Did you, did, you know, did we ever have conversations that were like difficult? You know, um, and so, I just remember, with this wonderful person having conversations about dogs and horses, and a mean woman who had a horse down the lane, just ordinary conversations, not conversations about things that were unordinary.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. We need care. We need validation. We need,
Patient.
yes, we need to know things are going to be okay. Not that things are not going to be okay.
Yeah.
How would you like to go in and see a doctor and I don't know, you did break your arm and they're like, oh, you're not going to live through this. And you're like, okay, well, oh my gosh, you know?
Right. It's kind of like, you're stuck in a pit and someone comes in, they're like, oh, you're stuck in this pit. Oh, that's really terrible. I'm sorry. That
Yeah.
really sucks for you.
Mhm.
And then they just kind of like leave you there and walk away, as opposed to someone who comes by and they're like, oh my gosh, you're stuck in here. Here, let me get you a rope.
Mhm.
Let me pull you out. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. That's a really good analogy, Margaret.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, instead of
Yeah,
this,
thank you. That's
instead of there's something wrong with you that you wouldn't know that you even needed a rope. like, you know?
hmm
But when we're not believed in, we do not believe in ourselves.
That's very true.
Right.
Very true.
And when we're told that there is something wrong with our family, we believe other people. Like, some people refer to this treatment as brainwashing.
Definitely. 100% I agree with that. Because it is.
Yeah.
It definitely is. It's not normal. This is not how helping people should be.
No, in fact, that's something that cults actually do. They turn you against your family so that you're more inclined to follow their suggestion.
Mm.
Yeah, and it happened. It happened.
Mm-hmm.
And
Happens every day.
go ahead. What did you just say?
Oh no, I was just saying it happens every day,
Yeah.
sadly.
Yeah.
One of the things I never really, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but one of the things I never really figured out is that why do you have to keep somebody, when you go into a quote unquote mental hospital in the United States, you're not allowed to talk to your family. and you're not allowed to have your phone.
Yep.
And because they use the ideas that you need to become acclimated to the unit. But doesn't that in some ways infer that you need to become dependent on the people that are quote unquote taking care of you? And that
Definitely.
if you have that many days, but see, they do the same thing in foster care. They will not let the 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 parent who they think is toxic, who someone has determined that was because what is toxic, they won't let them talk to the children. And so the children are having therapy and therapeutic conversations about their parents without their parents being there.
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah,
extremely toxic, if you ask me.
definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's kind of, not kind of, I think it's pretty inhumane,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
especially a minor, adolescent.
Yeah.
Your brain's not even fully developed yet. You're feeding them
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. No, you can't talk to your parents. No, you're not allowed to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to. What do you mean
And
I'm not allowed to? They're my parent, though. But they're not good. What do you mean they're not good? X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
You kind of fall into that trap. Then you kind of start believing that, what
Mm-hmm.
they tell you about
Mhm.
your parents.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
then sooner or later, hopefully not, but it does happen, you believe that everything they said about your parents, you believe it now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's very
Yeah.
brainwashing.
Mhm. And young people are especially vulnerable to that too, as you mentioned.
And then what happens when, because I was talking to another person today about the same thing that happened to this person when they were 14. What happens when you don't trust your family anymore? How soul crushing is that?
And isolating.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. And suffocating for
Mm.
yourself, that you don't feel like you have anyone to talk to anymore.
Mm-mm.
And it's also an attack on one's own identity
Mhm.
because because we are a part of our family. Like we share our genetics with our parents.
Yep.
And if they are written off as bad, what are we supposed to, how are we supposed to interpret that? Then we're partially, quote unquote, bad
Mhm.
Yeah.
too,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and it, um, if you believe that about yourself, then it can have a lot of long-term consequences, negative consequences.
Definitely. Definitely.
But we have to understand is that therapies, even if they try to say they're evidence based and treatments, they're opinions. They
Yes,
are subjective opinions.
I
they
agree
are.
with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's just say, because I've seen this happen, you've got to understand, I've been in the field for like what, almost 42 years. So I have seen someone go into one therapist, and that therapist thinks that they're a nutcase. And then they go see somebody else, and that therapist validates them because
Mm-hmm.
they're hearing it from different stories.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our colleague says that, when he was young, our colleague that participates with conferences with us, Dr. Rod Nardi, he says when he was young, he was savage. And one of the things that he figured out is that when he was doing I hope I'm doing a good credit to his story, but when he was in his, you know, training in medical school, he would see everybody being diagnosed as ADHD or bipolar with psychotic features or whatever. And he'd be like, well, these kids are like me. Why are these kids being diagnosed? And when he started questioning it, he said then he learned about submission, right? You don't question those kind of things. And then his curiosity waned, right? Because all the other psychiatrists thought that these people were crazy, then you start to see crazy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about our wonderful guest, our wonderful, beautiful, brave, super strong in their voice, that when I think about our wonderful guests, that what would have happened when those initial moments of misery were noticed at the school and someone would have said, it's going to be okay. Why don't we talk every day about this and walk around the school, have picnics, have Taco Tuesday? Like, we'll figure this out.
I think that alternative would have been so much better, but
Hmm.
it's too late for that. But I don't need it anymore. But if that was the go-to alternative when all of this first began,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, I really think things would have gotten better faster than they got worse.
Hmm. Hmm.
I don't think I would have gone down the whole rabbit hole and felt like if I was told that first, not to just sit in an office and talk to your counselor, especially at a school when you're middle school, I would say this all started in eighth grade. I think that would have gone a lot better. Because not even very soon after, it just feels like you're the anchor and you're gonna be sunk to the depth to the bottom of the ocean
Hmm.
and get up.
Hmm.
That's how it really felt after.
Hmm. And
Mm.
there's nobody that can pull that anchor up.
Yeah, it's really hard to do it, but I don't think anyone would have been able to.
But you think about this. Let's just say that that happened to you on a Thursday, that you got thrown to the ocean with the anchor. There was Wednesday and Tuesday and Monday and Sunday and Saturday and so forth before that.
Uh-huh.
You weren't in an ocean, you know? It, it, but then all of a sudden the the steps that took to quote unquote correct that Thursday led to a completely different language, a completely different lifestyle, a completely different forecasting, not just
Hmm.
of the future, but of how each day was going to go.
And it all happened very fast.
Mhm.
Kind of like, I mean, I get sad when I think about it,
Mhm.
but I feel like a lot of my childhood was stripped from that.
Mhm.
If certain things didn't happen the way it did,
Mhm.
maybe or maybe not. It's kind of like a what if rhetorical thought, but I feel like I got stripped of that, of a childhood, of
Mhm.
those teen years that a young person is supposed to enjoy and supposed to live
Mhm.
in different ways and instead of getting sucked into a whole
Mhm.
system that's
Mhm.
just tumble after tumble after tumble, you know? Just
Mhm.
back to back, day and night.
Mhm. I talked to a young guy recently that had just he had gotten out of rehab, like I think in August, and he was the one that talked about that, the same symptoms that we're talking about for this conference with our Greek colleagues. And he talked about it as being cohesion and confinement, but he also talked about that he was in a constant state of anxiety. He wasn't ruling his roost. He wasn't making his own decisions. And he was told that he was never going to be better. He would never get better. That this was something he was going to have to learn to live with, and that it would always be there. And his parents were told the same things. That it would always be there. And so we like to think that somehow as many children are not impacted by this as are, but the treatment that we're providing them with is making them sick. And I know as a researcher that I have never put anybody in a hospital. I have never put anybody on medication. I've never referred for medication. I've never told anybody that they were a mental illness diagnosis. Not once. Not even someone I didn't like when I was angry. I've never said the words.
Mm-hmm.
I've never looked at somebody like they had something wrong with them. And so the so when we talk as one human to another, and we figure out how the human who's coming to talk to us wants life to be different, and collectively we find out for how that to be different, and then it becomes different, and then they achieve what they want in life, and it's not hard. How do we help people know that these are viable alternatives? And I'm going to give you two the last words and then we'll wrap up.
Would you like to go first, or would you like me to?
You could go first, Margaret.
Okay. So the question was, how can we help other people to see that this is a viable alternative?
Both clinicians and people who suffer.
Yeah. Well, I think I appreciate the testimonials of those who have come to us, um, when they were in pretty dire straits in their lives. They've come to us, and I appreciate their voices when they speak about it, either in a podcast like this, or they're willing to have us write about it. I think that's definitely one way that we can create awareness that this is a viable option. And I was just thinking, like, what a major difference is we're speaking life affirming words
Mm-hmm.
to everybody who comes to see us, rather than
Mm-hmm.
negativity.
Yes. Yeah.
And I don't know how many who will listen to this have a biblical worldview, but I definitely do. And we're told to encourage one another and build each other up.
Uh-huh.
Speak words of life to those around you. And that's once you have had that done for you, once you've been given the example, I think that can be spread. We can do that for other people. And that's another way to spread awareness that this works, I think, is just, almost like a form of evangelism, kind of,
Mm-hmm.
where we just pass it on,
Yeah.
pass on the life affirming words. So those are my 2 cents regarding that.
I love that.
Thank
Love
you.
that. Dr. Sim, do you mind repeating the question one last time?
Never. I mean, like, I'm just so thrilled to have this opportunity for us to talk. So people are going to say, it can't be that easy. They're going to say that, you mean just talking to people positively and, talking about what they want to accomplish in life and having conversations where they're genuine and where we don't put people on the spot. We don't tell them that they're never going to get well. We don't tell them that the situation is hopeless and serious.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a book out called that the situation is hopeless but not serious. But but that's for another conversation. But that was a solution focused book. But the conversations that we have with the people that we care about that are going through difficult times, they're not skill set conversations. We don't follow a script.
Mm-hmm.
This day I'm going to go in and talk to this person, and that day I'm going to talk to this person, and I'm going to talk to this person for the first 15 minutes about this. It's not a scripted conversation. It's a genuine, present, intimate conversation about how does happiness occur? How does how do how do we have the goals, even if the goal for that day is just to have a good day
Mm-hmm.
that builds upon something else, and then the days become more frequent where happiness is occurring or hope is occurring or or just a lack of misery is occurring, and that builds upon people starting to believe in themselves again and not thinking that there's something wrong with them and not thinking that they're incurable. And when I see people not believing that they're a diagnosis anymore, it's almost like that is the caveat that then like like all of a sudden it's like there's this running for freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
they're empowered to do anything they've set their mind to.
Mhm. Because there's nothing keeping them from doing it
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
any longer. So,
Hmm.
how do we help clinicians know that this is a true possibility and that if they can develop different relationships and conversations with the people that they want to help, that they will have significant different outcomes?
Very good question. Um, I'll make it simple. I think that this is for clinicians that are like more clinical based within the
Mhm,
offices, right?
mhm,
Um, I would honestly and simply say, like, I know the institute is called Now I See a Person Institute, but literally, I think they should just start seeing people as a person,
mhm,
plain
mhm,
and simple. You know, they may say, well, it's not, but it is. I'd argue to say that it is because you're a person yourself talking to another person. You know, I don't know what their belief would be or how they would feel if someone told them everything that they're telling their client, but they themselves are a person and should be able to look at the person in front of them and just listen and just be there and not really push everything that they were taught through schools down someone's throat, you know?
mhm,
And maybe they could take a different approach by just, I wouldn't really know what to say. I would say they could try taking, I would say to maybe take a different approach. Hmm,
yeah.
I don't know. That's tricky actually.
Mhm,
Everybody's different. Like you were saying, something that you just said within the last 5 minutes stuck with me, but it's true. You know, I'm talking about Now I See a Person Institute regarding
Mhm.
this. When you guys say that we're not reading script, everything is genuine, we're patient and we're loving, it's true because you guys are. And because me as a former client, I felt that. And I think that the clinicians that are going into, and now this is regarding the clinicians within the offices, not Now I See a Person Institute.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think those clinicians, you know, even though they were taught what they were taught, every person is different.
Mhm.
And they should take into consideration, this is a human being. This person's life, what you say, especially if they're really young too, will affect them. So watch what you're gonna say because,
Mhm.
you know, they're coming to you with very dire and very vulnerable stages in their life. And if you really are there to help them, you should look at them as a human being. You know, they could have children of their own that are coming to people that need help. And it's kind of like to say, I hate to say this, but I'll say it. How would you like it if someone was telling your child everything that you're telling your clients?
Mhm.
And it's not a very settling feeling being labeled, being titled. Um, so I would say be patient. Be patient with people because everyone's going through different things in their life, and sometimes all you need is someone to listen. And as you said, Dr. Sim and Margaret, just being that positive voice. And I loved what Margaret said to speak life to people as in um
Mhm.
um speak with love and speak with patience, speak that you care. And I feel like that is a really important thing, no matter what age you are, to be doing that for another person, especially if they're coming to you for help.
Mhm.
That's what I have to say.
Wow.
Yeah, well said.
Well said. Well said. You know, um, I'm hoping that this wonderful person can come and do some more podcasts with us. It was such a joy. You know, one of the things that we have been doing over the past 2 or 3 years is that we've been having people that have been with us at one point in time to be able to talk with other clients or maybe other families. And especially about these kind of symptoms that we're talking about. When you're talking to, let's just say that you're talking to a mother and you're telling that mother of somebody that of a child, probably a teenager that's going through these types of hard times, and you say to them, I went through these hard times and I'm fine, and I'm happy. And as I heard somebody say the other day, that often talks with some of the people that we work with at the beginning. They said things like, "I was worse off," like you think as bad was going on in your family. Oh my goodness, you guys saw things in mine, and knowing, having this knowing that it's going to be okay. And it is a huge change in that narrative because no longer do you have that hopelessness and that things aren't going to change. And why live if things aren't going to change? You know things are going to change and you don't look back. Like I was talking to somebody recently and they were saying that because I was asking their advice for someone else that it seemed like, you know, that that encouragement that these symptoms are temporary. And that gets back into another whole rabbit hole of a conversation, but a positive rabbit hole in some way. We were having a conversation with Robert Whitaker of Mad in America, and he and I both are kind of these old people that lived before a lot of these symptoms were seen as a biological issue. Like research said that, but before that research, which a lot of people think is very faulty, people were seen to get well, and people did get well because
Mhm.
they weren't told that, oh, like it's genetic or it's biological or it's a broken brain and that things are not going to get better. And now that's almost one of the favorite researchers that you see that comes out. And it's in the papers. And, we have this new magical pill that's going to take care of everything. And that's for another conversation. But most of the people tell us that on those medications, that induces the symptoms.
Definitely.
Mhm.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
My mom has a friend
Mhm.
who has been on antidepressants for many, many years.
Mhm.
And um, keep in mind, anybody listening to this, I'm not a medical doctor, so this is not medical advice. But my mom uh, told me that this friend of hers stopped taking the antidepressants. And within a couple of weeks, she said she felt like a whole new person.
Wow.
And yeah, and she wasn't feeling like she was feeling really bad before.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, I didn't speak to her
But
directly,
right.
so I don't know everything
Um,
she was
but I'm gonna
dealing
add to
with.
this because time after time we have our case studies say the same thing exactly,
Hmm.
but they say about antipsychotics too. Like,
Hmm.
why do people go off antipsychotics? Because being on them is misery.
Hmm.
And we
Hmm.
live in a world, especially in the United States, that if you go off your medicine, oh my gosh, like the sky's got to come falling in.
Hmm.
And so many people go off their medicine and safe ways. And
Yeah.
Mad America talks about this too. And they are fine. We have colleagues in different countries that don't put people on medications.
Hmm.
It to like this young man that I was talking about that's not on medication. He was on so many medications. I think we're going to have the father talking about that in the next podcast. But that he was everything that the father heard the psychiatrist tell him he was, on those medications. And he thought the same thing. And so our next conference is going to be around belief, right? How do we believe in ourselves again? And I guess, how do clinicians, how can they believe in their clients? So, anyways, my best to everybody. Thank you so much. Margaret, can you stop the recording? And thank you so much for having this opportunity to talk.
Sure. Yep. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dr. Susan Swim with Now I See a Person Institute, and we have several uh, recordings for this conference in Greece, and we're so happy to have this opportunity. Um, I think everyone knows a little bit about me, but I'm going to introduce myself and what I do, and then my esteemed colleague is going to do that as well. So one of the things is that I started in the late 70s as a practitioner. And I was very fortunate to meet the people at the Houston Galveston Institute that were mentoring and teaching me. And of course, one was Harry Galushan that I've spoken before, and of course, Harlene Anderson, and a host of others. But at that point in time, as we do to now, we did not believe that severe mental health diagnoses are a static disease process, and that people can heal, transform, become asymptomatic from any type of situation. And it depends upon the treatment they receive, if that is going to be possible or not. And that was one of the things that Harry Galushan was studying before he passed away unexpectedly in 1991 from a heart attack. But he had just finished uh, writing about the disdiseasing of mental health and how we as practitioners, psychiatrists, psychologists, master's level practitioners have contributed thousands of words in deficiency language, and that this creates a black hole. It creates a magnet for people not to be able to be cured. If we are told that there is a biological reason that we're suffering instead of the trauma that we're going through, then we believe that. And because we believe that, we become hopeless. Our opportunities become narrowed. And as Harry said, that I think it was a quote from Wittgenstein, that if I see myself as filth, I have no choice but to go mad. And so since the 70s, we have practiced in a way that we treat our clients in what we're calling now a humanizing endeavor. We do many conferences. We have one actually coming up in April on humanizing ourselves for the others. How do we go into each session where we're one human talking to another human? And we're very, very fortunate at the Institute that we have teams. So we have within our teams, we have recovery consultants, and our recovery consultants are people who have experienced similar symptoms and have found that they were not biologically made to be this way, and that it was trauma that kind of spurned these symptoms, and that through hospitalization, medications, and therapy, that they learned that this was like something that they would never be able to get over. And such, those possibilities narrowed of them to find freedom again. And one of the things that I did in the early 80s was that I worked for a short period of time. I left the Institute and worked for a short period of time before came back on as faculty at a community mental health clinic. And so everybody that worked with us had been trained at the Institute. Actually, we're actually all in Harry's practicum class. And if anybody came in saying, I'm hearing things, especially psychosis. Yeah, and usually by the time people would come to us, they'd already been through multiple hospitalizations. Their insurance had ran out because it was a free clinic. And so we had a psychiatrist that came there once a week, and no new clients when we came there would see this psychiatrist. The people that had previously sought psychiatric treatment were of course referred to the psychiatrist because that's how the treatment had initially started for them. But for the people that we saw that they had these initial symptoms that had not been through the psychiatrist, that had not been through the medicalization paradigms, they never saw the psychiatrist. And when we diagnosed them as V codes. And so they weren't ever diagnosed with a mental illness diagnosis, regardless of the symptoms, regardless of the severity. There was also attached to this clinic a crisis unit hospital where people could be hospitalized for short periods of time. And so in the 2 years that we had this program, we never hospitalized anybody that again was somebody that came in and wasn't diagnosed. So you had people that were very symptomatic, very miserable. Their families were very miserable. Miserable things had happened to them. And they come in and you're talking as one human being to another. Like, I'm so sorry these things happened to you. And how on earth are we able to help you live? How are we able to not get back your life, but recreate a life that's full of transformation, full of freedom? In every case that we saw, they were able to um, have complete, if you want to call it recovery, repair, remedy, transformation, and become completely asymptomatic to the degree that, of course, they never came back. And so having those types of experiences as a young clinician, still in my 20s, it really did shape how I have practiced, how I have taught at different universities. And my research, and when I opened up Now I See a Person Institute in 2007. And since 2007, this is how all of our clients have received services. We have never hospitalized anyone. I've never personally hospitalized anyone. I've never referred anybody for medication. So when you do not see those as events that are going to help somebody, there's this unnarrowing of so many things that can be accomplished. So if you don't think of putting somebody in a hospital, then then they can stay at home. They can go with other family members. That whatever is happening, that it's not going to be creating more anxiety, more trauma of hearing that you're a mental illness diagnosis and that you will never get well. So our clients that come to us maybe heard that originally, but then that stops. And so through their services with us, we're talking about ordinary things. We're not problem focused. But we are, if you want to say, I think in some ways solution focused, because I think the reason why they're coming to us is to find ways for things to be able to be the way that they would want in life and even better. So when we heard about this conference, and we have so much longevity on working with people in these types of ways that have been diagnosed as some type of psychosis, we thought, let's get a few of the people that we have previously seen and record them and hear their ideas on their journey to wellness, on what they want from their practitioners. And so we have collated, I think, 4 of those recordings for this conference. And then this is our wrap up. And so we're doing this on a Sunday. We would have liked to have included some more of our colleagues, but for now we have a wonderful colleague with us that I'm going to let introduce herself.
Hello, friends. Thank you for listening to us today. My name is Ashley Lopez, or Hines, Lopez/Hines. And I am so happy to openly discuss how to bring empathy deeper into our field and our care for the people that we see, and how do we step forward into a future where we are taking more humanistic approaches, and how do we come together as great minds and bring on this wonderful new era of care and compassion.
Thank you so much. And Ashley right now is in Germany, and we're hoping that she's going to be able to attend this conference and be able to answer any questions that people might have about our sharing our stories. So one of the things that I think that we have found is that all of us have lived experiences, whether we're practitioners or people that have had previous services. And what we try to do in working as a team is that we try to help people know that recovery remedy is possible. And so when we are talking with our clients, we never see them through the lens of a diagnosis. We see them through the lenses of their stories, of who they represent themselves to be with us. And then through those conversations, that people collectively are able to make decisions. And they're able to see, as one guy was saying the other day, and that you're going to hear in his podcast, they're able to see for themselves that they are not a mental illness diagnosis, that they are not psychotic. And little by little, when they are able to see that they still have the same type of beinghood as they had before these symptoms became, they realize that this is like, maybe it's like COVID. Maybe it's like something that was very awful at one point in time, but that it went away. And so, Ashley, I don't know if you could share anything about stories of being told that whatever somebody's experienced will not go away.
Yes. So often when people are given diagnoses or they're being treated as if they have like COVID or the plague, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where the behavior is then normalized and then expected. So they kind of go into this loop and this cycle of like, oh, well, I just have depression, so I guess I just don't get out of bed. And I speak from experience on that, where as a child, I was told that I was a lot of things, and I believed them. And especially people are going to believe people that are in a role of power. Like if you have a doctoral degree, or if you're in law enforcement, or if you have any kind of authoritarian position, people are going to believe what you say. And take that to a mind of a child, where the mind of a child will believe anyone who's bigger than them, right? So if you tell a child that they are something that's horrible and wretched and they're sick and they're never going to be okay, then they're going to believe that for the rest of their lives, or at least for a very long time, until someone is brave enough to try to undo that sticky nest of deficiency language that they've identified with. And, if you have a whole generation of people who are given just this back to back of deficiency language of, you're never going to be good enough because you have this thing wrong with your head, they're going to believe it, and they're going to become very, very helpless.
Mm.
And it's very saddening to experience.
Mm-hmm. And so, the difference is when you come in and you see somebody and they say, oh, well, again, I'm so sorry that this happened to you. I mean, like, we don't have these rote things that we say to somebody. I'm just saying this for the sake of a presentation. Instead of like, you're bipolar with psychotic features, you're schizophrenic, and like, I'm sorry that this is happening to you, but it's a biological factor of what happens with extreme stress. And, or sometimes they don't even um, allude to that there was this horrific trauma that has been going on in their lives. And that if they just take medication and learn some skills, then they can try to live a life that can keep this at bay. Is that correct, Ashley?
Yes, that's
So there's never any talk of cure.
Yeah, no, there's never any talk of cure. It's more of a how can we ease the symptoms, the symptomatic behavior. There isn't a conversation that inspires hope within that realm. Like it's phenomenal that we're so controversial for um, attempting to inspire this hope of reminding people that, you know, what their emotions are innately human and that they can feel and experience something and move past it. That the concept that grief and suffering is stagnant is very unfortunately common within at least American psychiatry.
And it's something that every day there is a new theory, a new development, a new uncovering of some type of biological evidence that people are sick. And we're hoping through uh, through having these types of conversations, through the testimony of the people that we see, that it just offers other ideas. People do not, of course, need to do the same thing that we're doing because we don't even do the same thing that we're doing. We don't have a really rote way of what we're doing other than trying not to inspire deficiency language. How do we inspire the language that someone actually uses for themselves? And how do we inspire or co-inspire, collectively inspire ways that somebody wants to be in life, rather than having goals or treatment plans that are outside of the creation of the person that we're trying to help. And so, this was a field at one point in time that was like a revolution. We were going to come in and we were going to do things differently. And unfortunately, I think this revolution has changed, with all of the different, again, diagnoses that we have. And it might be different in Greece, but I know with my colleagues, they talk about these ideas like the ideas, are flying across to the pond. And so these might be certain types of issues that you might be facing if you're not facing them at this point in time. We we started 3 years ago incorporating recovery coaches and what we do. And that was really probably one of the most amazing things that have happened, because we have people that at one point in time, usually in their teenage years, that they went through the same type of situations, that they went through the same type of, whether it was medication, hospitalization, taking away all hope, families convinced that their children were never going to get better and that they were going to have to somehow take active conservatorship over them for the rest of their lives. Again, the prospects of having opportunities just narrowing. I was talking to a woman last year, and I remember that she was referred by someone that we know, and she said to me, they told me, again, we're talking about someone that experienced psychotic symptoms that no longer has that. And this was a woman that was a little bit older. She had had a huge amount of trauma. Actually, she was told that she had more trauma than anybody had ever heard. And they were doing some type of trauma therapy so that she had to remember everything. And that was making her more suicidal. So then she decided to stop therapy and stopped medication. And then she started finding freedom, that she didn't need the therapy nor the medication. But one of the things that struck me so much is that in that first conversation, she said, I was told that I would never be able to work again. I was told that I would not be able to return to the university. And I was like, I mean, like when I hear those things, I'm just like, who told you and how did this happen?
Yeah.
So
I think,
go ahead.
excuse me, I think that people shouldn't be told that they're not enough, and that we should encourage them to be whatever they want to be and find ways to help make those things possible for them. And we can do that through our words, just how we can tear people down with our words, we can build them back up. And
and I think that the practitioners that told her this were very well meaning. This is what they had been taught. This is what they had read about in books. And so they weren't trying to create hopelessness. But like that person that we were seeing together, that their son is now doing so well, and he was diagnosed as schizophrenic, that will be in that was in one of these recordings. It's often by well-meaning. People are trying to help. But I think what you said is just so important, that humanity has been taken out of these conversations. That when we 5150 somebody, are we thinking about other opportunities? Are we thinking about, can they stay with families? Are there other types of options rather than accidentally stripping more humanity than the original symptoms seem to created? So thank you so much, everyone, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you so much for Ashley for spending this time. Ashley's in Germany right now, so we're keeping her up. And if there will be any questions, again, I'm hoping that Ashley will be there and be able to participate in person in this conference. So enjoy these recordings, and we look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.